Hey friends, my name is Roger Reinert, and I'm your host today for Good Talk. You know, one of the things that I absolutely love about calling Duluth home is that we are a big small town. And there are all sorts of things that happen all around us every day that we know something about, but we don't know a lot about. And so the goal of our podcast is to delve more deeply into those topics. The services, the people, the events, the activities that make this such an amazing place to live, work, and call home. So thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to a great conversation, and we'll dive right into the next one. Well, hey everyone, thanks for joining us again for another episode of Good Talk. I'm Roger Reinert. I am here with my friend, Brok Hansmeyer, and we're looking forward to a fun conversation today. So, Brok, I thought I'd just start a little bit by talking about kind of how we know each other, and I think it probably first started from your day job as a realtor, probably, right?
Yeah, I don't know if we officially met, but do you remember the Wednesday night races?
Oh, sure.
We were like near each other in the running races. This is a good decade ago.
Okay.
But I would remember times that you would like pass me.
Okay.
But I knew who you were.
All right.
Because you're public service there.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we officially knew each other back then.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know about the learning stuff live. We're learning stuff live today, folks. So, oh, fantastic.
Because we were in the same like running pace.
Okay.
Sometimes you'd beat me, and usually you'd beat me, and then maybe every once in a while I'd beat you, kind of thing.
Oh, for fun.
Yeah.
But I remember knowing of you, like sort of what you just said. I knew of Brok Hansmeyer, like super successful in the real estate industry in Duluth, knew the name. Like I think we like maybe got to know each other a little bit more as I was getting ready to deploy to Afghanistan, and we were trying to sell a house, and you were helping us with that.
That's right. You know, my friend Adam connected us, our mutual friend there, and helped you get that house sold on Observation Hill.
Yeah, right. I remember talking to you. I think I was in Poland or something. Can't remember. We had a few deals fall through. This was the time, believe it or not, people, when it was like not super easy to sell every house that came on the market with multiple offers and no inspection and thousands over asking, right? So
a lot can change in 5 years.
Yeah, I can remember, and Brok and I have had this conversation off air. I can remember talking through, I think, a deal that fell apart. That's maybe what happened. And I was in Poland on my way to Afghanistan. I was not the best me. I was not the best me that I've ever been. So,
real estate is
it's a chance to say I'm sorry
and
again,
low
Brok.
and all sorts of emotions, you know.
Well, and then, so sort of maybe knew of each other at different points. Had sort of a professional connection, but think like friendship really grew out of us both attending the same church here in town, and then thanks to our other friend Brian becoming part of what we call our small group.
That's right. Yeah, been getting together now for a couple years.
Yeah, and I think incredibly powerful for me. One of the premise, I guess, and for folks listening, they may be like, well, why would anyone do this? But there was a book titled Suffering, and Brian invited the three of us to read this book together and talk about some difficult periods of life that we had all been through. And I don't think Brian would mind sharing. For him, it was losing a child when he and his wife were earlier in their marriage. For me, it was going through a really difficult time after I came back from my deployment, which included a divorce and just having kind of my life turned upside down. And and for you, I think it was what we might talk a little bit about today, and that was an adventure out in Mission Creek and in the Fond du Lac neighborhood of Duluth. You feel comfortable talking a little bit about that?
I do. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about that day. I think a lot of people know that you had an accident biking on one of our trails, but what would you feel comfortable sharing about that?
A lot of it.
Yeah.
Most of it. Yeah.
Okay.
So, that morning I dropped my wife and two kids off at the Minneapolis airport at like 5:45 a.m., said goodbye, drove back up to Duluth, and worked all day showing houses and writing offers and negotiating real estate contracts. and decided, I'm going to have a bachelor night,
Yeah.
as in I'm going to go on a long bike ride. My wife and kids are out of town. After that, I'm going to go eat some pizza and have a beer and go to sleep. Maybe have some chips too,
Just live it, right?
Yeah.
All the things.
So went out to Mission Creek, and I'd been on a lot of the trails out there before, not all of them.
Okay.
But I went out there because the main trails there are real flowy, and had some time, so I was going to go somewhere farther from home.
Okay.
Because usually I would go to like Hartley or Leicester, because that's near where I live.
Okay.
But Mission is a little bit of a drive to get out there.
Yep.
So, as I was biking, came up on a trailhead map and saw there was a side trail that connected back to the main trail. I'd never been on it before. Spent no time thinking about what a black diamond trail meant.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was flying through the woods, I came off a drop that I did not know was coming, and probably instinctively hit the brakes, which was probably the wrong thing to do, but that's my guess is what I did.
Mm-hmm.
Came off a 6-foot drop, went over the handlebars, and landed directly on my head.
Oof.
And I didn't know it at the time, but I broke my neck at 2 spots,
Okay.
the C1 and the C7 vertebrae.
Okay.
So I did not lose consciousness that I know of, but I was definitely like stunned.
Okay.
Had the feeling of being electrocuted. Basically my whole body went to a place of being completely stiff. And I tried to get up. I could not get up. I yelled help a couple times, which was pretty fruitless because I was alone in the middle of nowhere on a trail that is not used a lot. On a Saturday night like that. And, it was kind of like my breath had been taken away just from being stunned like that. So I tried to get up, couldn't get up. I slapped my legs, and it was like hitting, a 50-pound bag of cement. There was nothing there. I didn't feel a thing.
Wow.
So luckily,
And are you processing all of this in real time? I mean, like, what's Brok in that moment?
Yeah, you're like in crisis mode.
Okay.
You're thinking, I might die out here, if something doesn't happen.
Wow.
So after I couldn't get up and I yelled fruitless times of yelling help, I looked and I noticed that my backpack had shifted to my left, which allowed me to reach across my body and grab my phone.
Oh, wow.
So in the midst of that, because my hands had also been affected by the accident, so, my fingers weren't working super well.
Yeah.
So as I was pressing the phone, it was going, from English to Spanish to Chinese.
Oh, my gosh.
And, yeah. So I was very confused about that.
Yeah.
And finally just hit the red button, which was the emergency button on the iPhone, and it went straight to 911.
Wow.
And luckily had service out there.
I was going to say, I've run out there.
Yeah.
And almost never had service. Once you're sort of off the Highway 23 main drag through the Fond du Lac neighborhood, getting a cell signal can be kind of a miracle, almost literally.
Oh, yeah. We have friends that live out in the Fond du Lac neighborhood, and there's no cell phone reception at their house.
Yeah.
And I was maybe a half a mile from where that is. So.
Wow.
Yeah, and as I was laying on the trail talking to the 911 dispatcher, a couple mountain bikers were there as well, and one of them made a call to a mutual friend of ours, Adam, actually.
Okay.
And just to start letting people know to pray, and then I'd been in a bad accident, and then not exactly knowing what happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
He had to walk, 50 or 100 feet away up a little bit of a hill to have cell phone
to
reception.
get a signal.
Yeah, because where I was, he wasn't able to make a call.
But you were able to get it from...
Yeah,
Now, how did... there were 2 bikers that kind of came to your rescue.
Yeah.
They just happened to... I mean, you said you're on a trail, doesn't get used very often. You're Saturday night out in the middle of the... just happened.
Well, the timing of it worked well because they were at the trailhead parking and talking with the rescue crew, the firefighters, the EMTs, and the city has an app called Fenza, I believe it's called, which is a map of all the trails in the city of Duluth. And Waylon was looking at they had pinged my phone because I'd made the 911 call. So they could see me approximately where I was on the map.
Okay.
but they were trying to figure out how to get to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then Waylon, the mountain biker, knew, like, here's the best way to get to him. There's this trail over here. You could get your ATV out there, because they had an ATV that had the tracks on it.
Okay.
And I basically landed about 20 feet from where that trail that has they used for the ATV got to me. So luckily he was there and knew the best way to get to me.
Oh, wow.
Otherwise they would have had to have walked through the woods with the board and carry me out that way.
Wow.
Yeah.
And they were just there to ride that day, right?
That's correct.
Oh, wow.
Yep. They were just going out for a mountain bike ride and had no idea that something serious had really happened in the woods.
Now, this was just the beginning of a very long journey, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, what did those next days and weeks and months look like for you?
Well, Amanda had already flown to Texas, and so she was down there.
Right.
So I was able to talk to her when I was on the trail. And then, the next day, her and the boys and my mother-in-law flew back.
Okay.
My parents and some siblings were out in Portland on a family trip. They flew back.
Okay.
So basically, I got in the ambulance, went to the ER. They did a MRI, determined I had a cervical break at the C7 vertebrae and a spinal cord injury. Had a surgery that night.
Okay. Here in town
at the neuro unit there with the Sencha.
Okay.
And the next day, everybody had flown in. I had a few friends that were there at the ER when I got there. One friend drove up from Albert Lee and stayed the night with me. And then the second night, that Sunday night, I had another surgery because they had figured out during the first surgery that I'd also broken a second vertebrae, the C1 vertebrae. So I'm a C7 incomplete spinal cord injury.
Okay.
So basically what that means is I broke the C7 vertebrae. It bruised the spinal cord, but it did not sever the spinal cord.
Okay.
So the key word is incomplete, meaning there is some connection between the brain and the rest of the body, but because the spinal cord is a part of your nervous system, a part of your brain, everything went into trauma. And therefore, I could not feel or move anything from about here on down.
Okay.
Yep. And luckily, I did not bruise a spinal cord at C1. Superman Christopher Reeve broke C1 and C2.
Okay.
And so he, had no movement from his neck on down. Every time that he talked, he had to breathe through a straw, come back, talk, breathe through a straw, come back and talk. So if that would have done it for me, the way the neurosurgeon explained it to me is I probably would have died out on the trail because you lose your ability to breathe, your diaphragm, if that bruises the spinal cord. But luckily, mine did not.
Let alone reach over your shoulder, find a phone,
it was
dial
not
a phone.
happening. Alone on a Saturday night on a trail that no one else is going to. And I fell at the very bottom of a drop. So if no one would have known I would have been there, they would have gone off a drop and probably just landed right on me.
Oh, wow.
Luckily, that didn't happen.
Yeah. Now, post-surgery, lot of recovery, a journey that included going to some places, not just out of Duluth, but out of state, right?
Yeah, I went to Craig Hospital in Denver, Colorado. Okay. Came home for a couple weeks, basically to repack, because then we moved to Dallas, where my wife is from. Okay. My wife was pregnant at the time.
Right. And with your third?
With our third child, yep. Yeah. And our family in Texas has a one-level living house, and I was in a wheelchair all of the time at that time. Okay. And so we were able to move down there as I did a lot of recovery there, and our third child was born as well. Wow.
Now, as you've come, and then about how long before you were able to relocate back to Duluth and start? We all live new normals. Your new normal is maybe just more visible than some others. But how long between when you had your accident and you're like, okay, this I guess is the new normal?
It's been an evolving new normal.
Okay.
Yeah. I came back after my accident about a year later.
Okay.
And I did not have a driver's license at the time, so for a whole year, someone drove me everywhere I went. Okay. But when we were in Texas, I learned how to drive again. Okay. And then I took my driver's license test here in Minnesota. Okay. So, 16-year-old Brok, growing up in Esco, went down to the place in West Duluth to take my driver's
Right.
test with my mom and passed.
Yeah.
30.
Well done. I failed my first time. So.
Well, I failed my first time
Oh,
too.
okay.
But, round 2, I got it. And then at the age of 39, went down to the place in West Duluth with my mom and passed my test, So
This is the upward trajectory of life, right?
yeah, exactly.
Very well.
It was a highlight and also a pretty emotional experience,
Yeah, I'm
because
sure.
it was gaining independence, which is a
Right.
big word in recovery, is whatever independence looks like in the future.
Yeah.
Because there was no independence at the very beginning of my accident. Literally everything that I did, I needed help doing.
Right. And I have to imagine, as you think about your role as father and your role as husband and your role as real estate professional, it's huge, right? And moving back into some of those spaces, even though they're going to look different.
Yeah, exactly. Everything was on the table and unknown of what the future looked like.
Mm-hmm.
Would I be in a wheelchair full time? Would I ever regain any movement?
Mm-hmm.
Would we stay in Duluth?
Yeah.
Would I go back to real estate?
Yeah.
The basic question at the beginning was, would I survive?
Right.
Not just the trauma from the accident, but, 2 days after the accident, my heart stopped and it had to be chest compressed in the neuro ICU. And, 2 weeks after, or a week after I got to Craig in Denver, I choked because, I had to have the Heimlich done on me while I was in a hospital bed. And that's just part of the injury, is you're not able to cough as strongly as I was before.
Sure.
But I've regained that now. But at the
Okay.
beginning, I did not have that.
No, because we're friends, a couple of things you've shared with me over time that have really stuck with me. Well, a big thing that you've shared that's really stuck with me is how the experience that you've gone through has really impacted others. Often others you don't know, right?
Yep.
They come up and I know you've got a way of saying, but there's a way that they greet you that you're like, oh, you know who I am and that I've had this experience, even though I have no idea who you are, right?
That does happen quite often.
Yeah.
Like I just talked to someone on the phone the other day, and I was letting her know about my getting around with arm crutches, and she was letting me know, hey, you park in the back. It'll be the easiest way to get in the house. And yes, I did hear about your accident. My relative is into mountain biking. So yeah, I did hear about it.
Yeah.
So it happens quite often that more people know who I am than because of what happened to me.
Yeah.
And I'm also very visible in terms of,
Right.
Getting around with arm crutches. It's just the arm crutches are a differentiator for me.
Sure. And one of the stories you shared with me that's really memorable was the nurse, I think, the night that you came into the hospital. Do you remember? And she was really impacted by just that you were still there, and then seeing you, I think, again at some later checkup.
There's been many of them, but
Okay.
one of them, we came back to the neuro ICU about 4 months after my accident. And I was in the ICU at Essentia for 17 days.
Okay.
And so in a way that became my community, was being with nurses and doctors and CNAs. And so you get to know people, you just have small talk in the midst of really hard time in your life. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not going anywhere. I'm literally in a hospital bed and I can't go anywhere.
Right.
So you make small talk.
I'm your
and
new
you get
best
to know
friend. I'm
people.
here.
And the conversation I had 4 months later with the nurse, and I was in a wheelchair, and I also used a walker just to show them at this point I can use a walker a little bit and get around. And one of the nurses basically just said, just seeing you improve over the last 4 months has restored my faith in God.
I remember that story so well.
Yeah, and that wasn't something that I was expecting.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to live life, and other people see something and it encourages or inspires them in some way.
So how is you're a human and living through this experience, continuing, as you said, it's an evolving new norm, and yet you have these experiences where others are inspired by, see by, learn from. Like, what I mean, that nurse is a great example, but it maybe happens in small ways all the time when people are having those exchanges with you. Like, what does that feel like to be the individual in that experience, and not just the Brok Hansmeyer I know who had an accident, and isn't it great that, he's been able to do what he has?
It's humbling, to almost have like a stage where someone else sees and is encouraged or inspired. It's encouraging for me as well, because it reminds me of how far I've come.
Sure.
And, I've worked incredibly hard, to physically get here.
Right.
But also, I believe that God has given me healing. The connection between the brain and the body, that is God reconnected that part of my body. I did not go to the doctor and get a 2-inch, replacement of my spinal cord. Unfortunately, they don't have that out there yet.
Right.
It's just, it's just what happened.
Yeah.
And, even like the other day, I went to my son's event at school, and I parked my car, and I saw a friend, and I've known him for years, even before my accident. And he saw me getting out of the car, and he was like, "You drive?" And, I've been driving for a couple of years now.
Yeah, right. Every day.
But he's never seen me drive.
Yeah.
And that just kind of like blew him away. And he's like, you're incredible, man. Like, you drive.
Yeah.
And I don't drive with hand controls. I drive with my legs, know. And I think that kind of blows some people away as well, because they see me walk. But then, driving is a different thing.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of blows some people away, where I drive with my feet.
So to ask the tough question, in those exchanges, is there ever any sort of like, I don't know if frustration is the right word, but hey, you don't have to see me all the time. Like, it doesn't, like everything I do that's a normal day doesn't have to be a miraculous thing to you. I mean, have you ever felt that? And how do you sort of navigate those feelings?
Maybe if I'm like in a bad mood, or I'm in a hurry or something like that. I think it more comes along the lines when I feel like someone's being overly cautious.
Okay.
Or maybe trying to baby me a little bit.
Okay.
But one thing I've had to do is you learn how to tell people your needs.
Okay.
And this is what I can do, and this is what I can't do. And I've learned that for the most part, people are pretty understanding.
Okay.
And empathetic with that.
Yeah. Odd how if we can just communicate with others, like they tend to be more responsive than like expecting people to read their minds, expecting them to read our minds. So, you know, as you think about the experience you've gone through, recognition that others are seeing something, inspired by, connecting to, even if they haven't had a similar experience. You know, where do you feel life is calling you? Like, what do you feel like you might be called to do with that?
Well, I mean, since a couple days after my accident, my friend says, "You're going to write a book someday." Okay. And that's...
You've not yet, right?
I have not written.
Okay.
Nope. So that I think about that.
Okay.
You know, I do a lot of, conversing with people, and I enjoyed that before my accident. Now there's just an extra level of challenge with doing things physically.
Yeah.
So I think, now that we live in an era where Zoom is a lot more common, I think just being able to sit down with people and talk with people on a one-on-one level, I get a lot of fulfillment out of. And when we talk about faith or talk about like hard, challenging things, just being an encouragement to people, I think can be a good thing.
Is there an opportunity? Have you had an opportunity to talk about the transformation of your life that's really stood out to you, whether that was with an individual or a group or a school or anything like that?
About a year ago, sharing at the Vineyard, my story there.
I remember this.
And that was powerful for me. Once a year, I speak to the physical therapy second-year students at Scholastica here. Okay. And just explaining my story. And, physical therapists, they're kind of like engineers of the body, and, explaining like my injury and where I started and where I'm at today and like how I maneuver throughout life and how my body responds to things.
Yeah.
That's also like really fulfilling to be able to explain that to people that are learning the physical therapy side of things and will be helping people in the future.
Right. And thinking and helping them see the parameters of possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially as they're beginning their careers. That has to be a real gift for them as well.
Yeah, I would think so. Because, I've seen physical therapists at different eras of my recovery. When I was in the ICU, my physical therapy was doing pretty minimal things.
Yeah.
It was like, can Brok sit up today without his heart stopping?
Yeah.
That was physical therapy for the day.
It's a significant thing to relearn.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, now it's walking with braces.
Yeah.
And that's the next era that I'm about to enter here in a month or two.
Yeah. It's you, the question that I'm trying to put the right words around is, what in this period have you also felt is most challenging? Obviously, we could point to the accident, clearly challenge, but knowing you a bit, knowing that you've moved from that real marker, life changed.
Yep.
But now in this new phase, what is the thing that maybe can be most discouraging if you were to allow it to be?
Well, with the spinal cord injury, with it being incomplete or complete, because I was incomplete, I've always considered the future unknown, as in, my first goals were to be able to stand, to be able to move, anything, just move something. And I didn't move anything for 30 days. Yeah. And I've had an amazing amount of recovery with being able to stand and get around with arm crutches. So the unknown has been a beautiful yet challenging thing with where the unknown of the future is. But also because I've had all this improvement, I'm closer to what I was before the accident, but I can't do everything that I want to do physically. So, as we are now in spring, biking and going outside and running and hiking, my kids are, learning how to bike and I do have a trike, but I don't bike the way that I used to be able to bike.
Sure.
So those are the missing out or the feeling of missing out is a really big, hard thing to
maybe almost
to
a tension in making so much improvement that like you can remember, and I'm close, but I'm not, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And the way my friends that have complete spinal cord injuries have described it to me as sort of they had their day of reckoning, their accident, and some of them have had no recovery, as in there's no feeling or movement below their injury. And so they've had to process what the future looks like, maybe more quickly earlier on in their recovery, because it's basically, unless there's a miracle, you will, be in a wheelchair for life. Yeah. And so the future is always unknown, but it's a little bit more of a clear picture of where they're probably going to be in life, as in they have to adapt
with more certainty.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have to adapt with their house, as in, I'm in a wheelchair, I have to get a ramp. Does my wheelchair fit in the bathroom, the bedroom? Can I wash dishes with this thing?
And this new norm is a little more set.
Yes.
Where you've got possibility, but that's also the unknown.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, as we wrap up our chat today, I imagine you've had countless conversations with individuals who have had tough chapters in life, who ask you for guidance or counsel, words of wisdom based on your own experience. What is it that you find is the most helpful thing you can share?
Hope is a beautiful thing. And, those cliche things like never give up. Yeah. I think also it's good to grieve. Oh. It's good to talk. It's good to get those frustrations out, because they're going to come out in an ugly way if you don't grieve, they come out as other things.
And for you, have you found drawn closer to God in your faith life, or was this a real, like, bad things don't happen to good people kind of thing?
I mean, it's been many things.
Yeah.
I've definitely wrestled with God, and I still, it's hard to accept the reality of
Sure.
the injury.
Yeah.
But just the gift of life is really a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I experienced death in a different way now. It's been almost 4 years.
Yep.
And just seeing other people or knowing people that have passed away or have had serious injuries themselves or family members, strokes or car accidents or whatever, just cherishing life
Yeah.
has been a lot more, I've been in tune with that more.
Not something to take for granted.
Yeah. And just being able to be alive.
Right.
Because I was millimeters away from almost not being here.
Right.
So even in the midst of really hard, frustrating things that happen in life, I still am grateful to be alive and all the things that I still get to experience, as a dad. And
you get to experience those annoying things because you are alive, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the beautiful things, now that it's spring and, hearing all the creeks rush this spring was awesome. And seeing my kids grow up and,
yeah. Well, I'm glad you're here as well. So grateful for our friendship. Brok Hansmeyer, thank you for joining us today on Good Talk. Been fun to walk through your story a little bit more, and appreciate your willingness to be who you are and share that with others that you run into on a regular basis in our community.
Thanks for having me, Roger. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for joining us today. You've been listening to Good Talk. I'm your host, Roger Reiner, and we look forward to having you with us for our next conversation.